It's a big, big day in the MLB lockout saga. It's either going to be really good news at the end of the day or really bad news at the end of the day. So we'll talk about what's going on and what's going to happen next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes 3 days a week until the lockout ends, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And coming up on today's show, we are going to, like I said, talk about the latest with the lockout. We're also going to continue our look at the National League West, area by area for all the different teams. Today we're going to be comparing the different lineups. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about what is going on with the lockout. And so kind of the last place we left it on this show, of course, last week they couldn't reach an agreement by this artificial deadline that MLB made of last Tuesday when they were in Florida. Remember, and they had that long 16 and a half hour meeting. They couldn't reach an agreement, and MLB said, we're going to cancel games if we can't reach an agreement by this quote unquote deadline. And the deadline passed. The owners made a best and final offer, quote unquote, even though they denied that terminology, but apparently they did use it. It was not an acceptable offer. There was no way it was going to be accepted. The players rejected it, and the owners Rob Manfred announced the cancellation of the first two series of the year. But they met again a few days after that. The lead negotiators met. No players were present. And basically there's been some back and forth. The players made a proposal, and the reaction from the owners was disgust and anger, which is honestly, we have to really realize that a lot of these reactions are very deliberate, and it's designed to kind of sway people's opinions. And I just don't read too much into these, furious reactions, because then we hear the next day they meet and maybe make some progress. So we kind of have to tune out the noise and focus in on what's really important. And so what's really important is that they've continued to meet since then, including, I think it was on Monday, they met many times and exchanged proposals even, or at least talked ideas, big ideas. And it wasn't even really reported in the media that they had these meetings until late in the day. It was like pretty late last night when we heard that they had meetings all day and exchanged some proposals. But so what we know now, the latest as of Tuesday morning here, is that MLB has created another artificial deadline of today in order to strike a deal. If they can strike a deal today, the league is saying that they will provide full pay. They will have 162 games, and they will provide, a full year of service time. Those are all negotiable elements of a new deal. So even if this deadline passes, those are things the players are going to push for anyway. But the league is kind of stating that its position is that today is the deadline for that. So if today passes and there's no deal, the league is going to come out and announce the cancellation of another week of games. So we'd be probably missing the first 4 series of the year at that point, according to the league. Again, the players can and will say that, even if games are missed, at some point you've got to cancel games because the calendar wouldn't allow 162. But the players, even in that case, will insist upon being paid for a full season and receiving a full year of service time, no matter how long the season is. The league is not going to have that position. So anyway, they're going to fight about that. But we also heard that yesterday the league has increased its competitive balance tax proposal for the initial threshold up to $228 million. And that is very significant because in their best and final offer, which again, of course, wasn't actually a final offer, and it can't be because they're required to continue to bargain. But in their best and final offer, it was $220 million in year one of a 5-year deal. It was $220 million in year two, $220 million in year three. So no increases for 3 seasons. And then $224 and then $230 in years 4 and 5. The players have been asking for a $238 million initial threshold in the first year, and then big increase, $6 million increases pretty much every year for the 5 years. So anyway, the midway point of those two numbers is 228, and we have reports that the league is up to 228 in its offer, although still only increasing by $10 million over the life of a 5-year deal. But the point is, there's movement there, and it's not hard to see them coming to an agreement. I don't think the players are going to accept 228 only going up to 238 over 5 years. But if you start at 228 and get it to 250 at the end of 5 years, I think that starts to look like something they would accept. And this is just for the competitive balance tax. There are obviously other issues, but this has been the probably biggest sticking point in the negotiations to date. So coming up next, we'll talk about what else was in this latest proposal, or at least is being floated by the league reportedly. And then eventually, like I said, we'll talk about the National League West lineups, where the Giants rank and where everybody else ranks around them. So stay tuned for that. But first, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to Olympic coverage. Well, I don't think that's happening anymore, but baseball as well, that you can bet on division winners. Earlier, they had bets about when the season was going to start. And I said on Twitter, I would put a bet on April if I was making a bet based on the odds they were giving. So follow our show for all the latest betonline.net odds this season. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, as promised, we are going to continue talking about the latest with the MLB lockout. I feel like I'm being a little bit naive to have a little bit of hope today. By the time you're listening to this, a lot more has probably come out about what's going on today. There is hope. I wouldn't say like real optimism, but there's a sliver of hope for today. And it really does seem like they've the league has given enough, at least on the CBT, to have it be not impossible to see a deal coming together, at least on that issue. I can see the starting point is right at 228. I think that's a fine starting point. It would be a big increase of $18 million from where it was at the end of 2021. I'm going to do quick math here. 18 out of 210 is 8.6%. So an 8.6% increase from one year to the next. The players want more. I mean, they want 238, but I just don't think they're ultimately going to get that. And the fact that they're asking for 238, I think, coming down to the 230 range has always seemed like where it would need to get. So anyway, we'll talk about what else is being floated here in just a second. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, what else is going on here in these negotiations? That the CBT, competitive balance tax, luxury tax, the threshold is the big thing that's been holding us up. But we're also talking about minimum salaries. But let's be clear, the last time we've heard about what the league is offering, what the players are asking, they're close. They're in the $700,000 range for the league minimum salary. I think the league offered $700,000 and the players have been asking in their most recent proposals for $715,000. So that's bridgeable. If the CBT stuff is true, then to me, the big issue becomes the pre-arbitration bonus pool. And I want to be clear that this is a new thing. There was no pre-arbitration bonus pool before. So if they create this is a brand new structure to benefit pre-arbitration players. And that is a good thing for the players. And it's a good thing for the league to be willing to give up. But they're far apart on the amount. So the league is offering apparently $30 million into this pre-arbitration bonus pool. And the players, last we heard, when they were in Florida, were asking for $85 million in this pool. And then we heard that at some point after they left Florida in the last week or so, they lowered it to $80 million. So there's still a $50 million gap there. And then also, the league is not talking about increasing it at all over the span of the 5-year collective bargaining agreement. Whereas the players want this, they want to start at 80 million and have it go up every year, I think by $5 million a year for the 5 years. So that is a big gap, and it's become the area where there's the biggest gap between these two sides. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say exactly what it would take because there is such a big gap there now. But I mean, and a big part of the gap is the issue that the players want it to go up every year by $5 million, and the league wants it to stay flat at 30 million. So what would it ultimately take? Maybe starting at 30 and having it go up to 50? That might be where the players would settle, especially if they can get the CBT where they want it. Maybe the players want to start at 50 and then have it stay flat. And then in the next CBA, they can get it up to 75 or something. I don't know exactly what it would take, but that's where we are with that. So if there's anything that holds us up, it looks like it might be that at this point instead of the CBT, if the league really is willing to start with the first threshold at 228 million. There's also the draft lottery, something we haven't talked that much about. But again, this would be a new development for Major League Baseball. There has not been a draft lottery in the past. And the concept is that X number of draft picks are not guaranteed, but they go into a lottery. So the league is proposing, I believe, 5 draft picks up in the lottery, and the players are asking for 6. I believe those numbers are right. They're 1 pick apart. So that is bridgeable. And the idea is the bottom 5 teams in the league, for example, wouldn't be guaranteed in the order that they finished picks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those picks would go, is it just among the 5 teams that the lottery would ultimately go to? I actually don't know exactly, but those 5 picks would not be guaranteed to those 5 teams in that order, or 6 teams. It's bridgeable. I think it'll ultimately, of course, seemingly end up on one of those 2, but obviously, we're talking about a small difference there of just 1 pick. So there are other issues at play as well, but those are kind of the main ones. There's also this service time manipulation stuff about rewarding players with a year of service time, no matter what, if they finish in the top 2 in Rookie of the Year, something like that. Efforts to prevent teams from manipulating service time. I don't know that these go far enough, and unfortunately, it looks like we may continue to have this problem because the players aren't necessarily prioritizing this as their number one concern right now. But just to have something in there where there's an incentive for teams to put their young players on the field to begin the year. The thing is, like, finishing in the top two in Rookie of the Year is difficult, and teams realize, I don't know. I mean, I guess, well, the owners have to get something back. So it's not just that the player is rewarded a year of service time. They've talked about rewarding teams with a pick if a player ultimately wins an award and they had them on the roster to start the season. Anyway, we're kind of getting into the weeds here with this stuff. The main issues, I think, are the pre-arbitration bonus pool and the competitive balance tax. And so they're meeting today. Like, it's been hush-hush so far. They apparently met this morning, and we haven't really heard much. We heard that they met and that they separated, but the fact that it's been quiet, to me, gives me even more hope. And just hold on to the littlest bit of doubt that they could push through this and potentially get something done. I'm an optimist. If it doesn't happen, importantly, I want to say the league is going to come out and announce another round of cancellations of games. And then it gets even more complicated the deeper we go, as we've talked about before, because the league will stop offering to pay players their full salary, and they'll stop offering to give players a full year of service time. And that gets really complicated. So if we don't get through today with a deal, which is more likely than not, I should say, then it's going to get far more complicated the further we go, and a deal will be tougher to reach. And so I think both sides understand that. So there's motivation to push something through today. So this might all look silly tomorrow, but that's where we stand today. So coming up next, I want to compare the National League West lineups as we continue to run through. We've looked at the starting pitching. We've looked at the bullpen in past episodes. Every episode moving forward until we get through this, we're going to compare the NL West teams in different areas. So stay tuned for that. But first, it's that time of year. I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat healthy thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs yet? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Sounds delicious, right? Go to BuiltBar.com, scroll down to their macros chart, and you'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you can just buy it yourself on rockauto.com? If you feel more comfortable with a dealership doing the installation, buy it yourself, bring it to them. They'll be happy to install it for you, and you'll have saved a bunch of money. RockAuto.com is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right. As promised, we are going to continue our run through the National League West, this time looking at the lineups. Pretty much so far, the Giants have ranked third to me in the different areas we've looked at. We looked at the starting rotation and we looked at the bullpen. I think actually I had the Giants second in one of those areas. I believe we've had the Dodgers first in both of them. Actually, I think the Dodgers were kind of on the cusp of being third in my starting rotation projection. We've got the Trevor Bauer uncertainty, of course. Clayton Kershaw is injured and a free agent. So they've got Walker Buehler, who quietly kind of took some steps backwards in some ways. I know the ERA was really, really good, but there's some peripheral stuff that was a little bit of a red flag for Buehler. Anyway, you can listen to those episodes if you want to hear me talk about that. But in terms of the lineups, I think that, on paper, the Giants are certainly near the top of the lineup depth chart in the division. If we look at non-pitcher weighted runs created plus in 2021, Giants were second in baseball behind only the Houston Astros, ahead of the Dodgers by 1 percentage point, and the Padres were all the way down at a 103 weighted runs created plus, meaning just about league average offense overall. And if you look at, on paper, the Padres do have quite a good lineup. Let's break them down really quick. The top of their lineup, the top four specifically, it's hard to be much better. Trent Grisham, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jake Cronenworth, and Manny Machado. Left, right with, Fernando Tatis Jr., one of the best hitters in the game. This guy is only 23, and he basically is just an absolute monster. He ended up hitting 42 home runs, stole 25 bases, 328 isolated power, 611 slugging, 156 weighted runs created plus. Tatis is a monster. Machado is still just 29 himself, and he's having a excellent career. Cronenworth is a good hitter, Grisham a good hitter, but then it kind of falls off with Eric Hosmer, Will Myers, Jurickson Profar, Austin Nola, and who knows at DH, I guess. Who knows? So anyway, it's tough to say that the Giants have a better lineup than that, but I think the Giants have a much deeper roster than the Padres, and the guys on the bench for the Giants and all the platooning that the Giants do, they kind of get the most out of the guys they have. But when we look at the projected lineup for the Giants, we're talking Tommy La Stella, Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford. You're missing Posey and Bryant out of that lineup. I just looking at this, eyeballing this, I'm going to have the Giants below the Padres. And I think when we look at the Dodgers, we're going to have certainly the Giants below the Dodgers as well. It's crazy when you look at the Dodgers lineup. You got Mookie Betts and Trey Turner starting things off at the top of that lineup. Those are two of the very, very best players in the game. And then you've got Max Muncy and Justin Turner, Will Smith, Chris Taylor. In this projected lineup on Roster Resource, you've got Cody Bellinger batting seventh. He had a disastrous season, but he was the MVP just a couple years ago, and he's 26 years old. AJ Pollock, Gavin Lux, who was the top prospect in the game, projected to bat ninth. So the Dodgers lineup to me is clearly on paper number one when we're looking at the division. I think it's more of a toss-up than you might think with the Padres, but the Giants need to add someone, a right-handed hitter of some strength to that lineup for me to have the Giants on par with or even ahead of the Padres. I think when all is said and done, the Giants will get the most out of their players, maybe more than any team, just like they did this year. But for now, they rank third there for me. And I just know that the Rockies and D-backs, as they have been, I think, in every one of these categories, are going to rank behind them. So Arizona, you've got, it's not a great lineup. I mean, Ketel Marte, Dalton Varsho, Christian Walker, David Peralta, Carson Kelly, Seth Beer. It's a mediocre lineup. I mean, Ketel Marte is a real difference maker, and then there's a lot of young players who are pretty unproven. And if we look at Colorado, they've got Raimel Tapia, Brendan Rodgers, Charlie Blackmon, CJ Crone, Ryan McMahon, Connor Joe, who's kind of broken out with the Rockies. How about that? Giants fans will remember Connor Joe. They ridiculed him and Farhan Zaidi for having him on that opening day roster and lineup. He played a total of 8 games with the Giants, and man, people were way too quick to judge, but he had a nice little season for the Rockies in 2021 and figures to be a part of their roster moving forward. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch as we move forward. But it's hard for me to say who I would necessarily take out of those 2 lineups. I'll probably go, the Rockies are going to score more because they play in Denver, but if we're kind of park adjusting, it's hard for me to say. Those 2 teams are, I want to say the Rockies, to be honest, but I think it's actually pretty close. And a lot of it is because, the Rockies play at altitude. So that certainly plays a major factor in their offense. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the majors, past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again 2 more times this week. We'll give you, if there's news about a CBA, we'll be back with that, and we'll also have a mailbag later in the week. And we're going to do a Sabermetrics 101, kind of advanced stats 101 at some point as well as we move forward. So anyway, can't wait to be with you again 2 more times this week. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.